நேயர்களுக்கு வணக்கம். இது அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகம் தமிழ் எங்கள் மூச்சு. www.americantamilradio.com என்ற எங்கள் இணையதளத்தினூடாகவோ தர இறக்கம் செய்யப்படக்கூடிய அமெரிக்க தமிழ் வானொலியின் செயலி டியூனின் மற்றும் ரேடியோ கார்டன் ஊடாக இணைந்திருக்கும் உலக தமிழ் உறவுகள் அனைவருக்கும், அதே நேரம் அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்தின் வலைக்காட்சியின் வாயிலாக யூடியூப் மற்றும் முகநூலினூடாக இணைந்திருக்கும் எங்கள் வலைக்காட்சி நேயர்களுக்கும், அமெரிக்க மண்ணின் வாஷிங்டன் தேசத்தில் இருக்கும் எங்கள் பிராந்திய கலையகத்திலிருந்து அன்பு தமிழ் வணக்கங்கள். மற்றும் ஒரு சிறப்பு நிகழ்ச்சியில் இன்றைய நாளும் உங்கள் அனைவரையும் சந்திக்கின்றோம். யாதும் ஊரே யாவரும் கேளீர் என்ற தலைப்பில் இந்த நிகழ்ச்சி இடம்பெறுகின்றது. அமெரிக்காவை எடுத்துக்கொள்ளும் இடத்தில் இன்றைய நாள் ஜூன் 19ஆம் நாள், ஜூன்டீன்த் என்று ஆங்கிலத்தில் கூறுவோம். விடுதலை நாள் என்று இங்கு தமிழில் நாங்கள் அதை கூற முடியுமானால் கூறலாம். அடிமைத்தனம் ஒழிக்கப்பட்ட நாளாகவும், அதே நேரம் கருப்பின ஆபிரிக்க அமெரிக்க இன மக்களுக்கு அந்த அடிமைத்தனத்திலிருந்து விடுதலை வழங்கப்பட்ட நாளாகவும் தான் இது வரலாற்றில் இடம்பெறுகின்றது. 1865ஆம் ஆண்டு ஜூன் மாதம் 19ஆம் தேதி டெக்சஸ் மாநிலத்தில் இருக்கும் கேல்விங்ஸ்டன் என்ற நகரில் அன்றைய தளபதி கோர்டன் கிரேஞ்சர் என்பவர் அடிமை சாசனம் அளிக்கப்பட்டதாக அன்றைய நாள் தெரிவித்து, ஆபிரிக்க அமெரிக்கர்களும் ஒரு சமமாக நடத்தப்பட வேண்டும் என்ற அந்த கொள்கையை ஆபிரகாம் லிங்கன் அவர்கள் 1862 பிரகடனப்படுத்தி இருந்தார். 1865 ஜூன் மாதம் 19ஆம் நாள் இது உத்தியோகபூர்வமாக டெக்சஸில் நிர்ணயிக்கப்பட்டிருந்தது. அதன் அடிப்படையில் அன்றைய நாள் முதல் ஜூன் 19ஆம் நாள் ஜூன்டீன்த் அல்லது ஜூன் 19th ஜூன்டீன்த் என்ற தலைப்பின் கீழ் அமெரிக்கர்களால் நினைவு கூறப்பட்டு வருகின்றது. இன்றைய நாள் நாங்கள் 3 எங்கள் எதிர்கால தலைமுறையை அழைத்து வந்திருக்கின்றோம். இது தொடர்பாக அவர்களது கருத்துக்கள் அறிந்து கொள்வதற்காக. இந்த ஜூன்டீன்த் அல்லது விடுதலை நாள் உண்மையில் கருப்பின மக்களுக்கு, அதுவும் குறிப்பாக ஆபிரிக்க அமெரிக்க மக்களுக்கு உண்மையில் விடுதலை வழங்கப்பட்ட நாள் தானா? 155 வருடங்களின் பிற்பாடு எவ்வாறு அவர்கள் தற்பொழுது நடத்தப்படுகின்றார்கள் என்பது பற்றியும், அவர்களது அபிப்பிராயத்தில் அவர்களது சமூகங்கள் மத்தியில் எவ்வாறு இந்த ஜூன் 19 விடுதலை நாள்ல மக்கள் மத்தியில் இடம்பெறுகின்றது என்பது பற்றியும் அறிந்து கொள்வதற்காக நாங்கள் 3 அழைத்து வந்திருக்கின்றோம். அனிதா, தர்மராஜா, ஆகாஷ் பத்மதேவன், அனுஷா, ராஜேந்திரன். இந்த 3க்கும் அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்தின் சார்பில் எங்கள் நன்றி கலந்த வணக்கங்கள். அனிதா, ஆகாஷ், அனுஷா, வணக்கம்.
வணக்கம்.
எப்படி இருக்கின்றீர்கள்?
நல்லா இருக்கோம். How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. So we'll உங்கண்ட அனுஷா, நீங்கள் இப்ப ஆகாஷும் அனிதாவும் அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்துக்கு பரிச்சயமான முகங்கள், வேறு வேறு நிகழ்ச்சியில வந்திருக்கிறாங்க. நீங்க ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் வந்திருக்கின்றீர்கள், வந்ததுக்கு நன்றி. ஜூன் 19th உங்கண்ட அபிப்பிராயத்துல ஒரு 2ஆம் தலைமுறை அமெரிக்கராய், தமிழ் அமெரிக்கராய், இந்த ஜூன் 19th அல்லது இந்த விடுதலை நாள் உங்களது பார்வையில் எப்படி இருக்கின்றது?
எனக்கு வந்து I see like இவ்வளோ நாளா we've been waiting. I feel like it's a final moment நம்மளுக்கு, and it's a true celebration for Black Americans, நம்ம communityக்கு, South Asian communityக்கு. I think everyone சேர்ந்து celebrate பண்றது வந்து this is the true freedom for all Americans. July 4th வந்து, you know, it used to be controversial. So that was our freedom day. That was the day that we celebrated freedom from the British. But for me, this Juneteenth I think is the true freedom that we should all be a part of the celebration.
Would you say that July 4th is supposed to be the Independence Day, whereas June 19th to be the Freedom Day in terms of giving equal rights to all communities in terms of how this land was pretty much planned by the founding fathers?
Kandipa, you know, I think a lot of, you know, Velakaran who live in America, July 4th is their freedom day. You know, they never felt on the oppression, right? So that was their true freedom day. But now we see not everyone is free until we're all free. So I think this is our freedom day, and that was maybe our Independence Day. Both can coexist.
Right. Nandri, Anusha. Akash, from your perspective, what would this Juneteenth mean to you as a second generation Tamil American?
It's shocking that it was only last year that I discovered what Juneteenth was. And it's something that I should have known since the beginning, because this was the day that slavery ended, because Texas was the last state to officially free their slaves via order from the government. As a Sri Lankan American / South Asian American, I feel like this was the first step towards recognizing people of different races as one. Because like Anusha said, it was only Caucasian Americans that actually were free. It's not like people really cared about African Americans, South Asians, East Asians, Southeast Asians, Asians in general, as well as Latino Americans, Native Americans. Like, this is at least the first step. And there are plenty of other steps, but they say that, but I feel like this is very important because we haven't been recognized as our own free people until like later in the democracy. They say that it's technically only been a democracy for 55 years because of the Civil Rights Act. So I feel like Juneteenth, this is a very long overdue, and I hope that this is another step towards recognizing people as free rather than just from the perspective of Caucasian Americans.
Thank you, Akash. Anita, from உங்கண்ட பார்வையில ஒரு தற்பொழுது 3வது வருட கல்லூரி மாணவியாக இருக்கும் நீங்கள், இலங்கையை பூர்வீகமாக கொண்ட இடத்தில் இலங்கைக்கும் இந்த ஜூன்டீன்த்துக்கும் இடையிலான தொடர்பு ஏதாவது இருக்கின்றதா?
நான் நினைக்கிறேன் இலங்கை, with our Sri Lankan issues and the issues here with Black Americans, there are a lot of similarities. There are minority groups that are oppressed, that face discrimination from government policies or from societal practices, and in Sri Lanka it led to violent war. Here there was obviously, we had the Civil War that was fought to end slavery, but since then it's been an ongoing struggle for Black Americans to have equal treatment in society, to get to have the same rights. There's still much more that needs to be done, both in both Sri Lanka and
here in the US. Right. So thank you உங்கள் 3 பேருக்கும். ஆனா இதுல இன்னொரு சிறப்பான அம்சம் என்னன்னா, இந்த வருடம் இந்த 46வது ஜனாதிபதியாக ஜோ பைடன் அவர்களின் வந்த பிற்பாடு இந்த வருடம் அதுவும் ஜூன் 17வது நாள் உத்தியோகபூர்வமாக officially Juneteenth has been declared as a federal holiday for the first time. It took almost 150 plus years to be recognized as a federal holiday. So from your perspective, if we take the entire population here in the US, 13% are African Americans. It took all these years and the 46th president to come and declare this day as a federal holiday. Surprisingly, it was passed with no issues. That being said, being a college student, how would you treat this, Akash, in your work, especially when you are looking at this changeover that took 150 plus years?
Could you clarify the question? I wasn't sure.
The question is, it took 155 years to recognize this day and make this day as a federal holiday. Whereas we had said it's the Independence Day, or it is another Independence Day declared in 1865 officially by the government, but the recognition was not given until June 17th, 2021. So from your lens as a college student who is getting ready to face the world, how would you, what would this mean to you?
Well, it means quite a bit because I'm not African American, but as a general minority, it means quite a bit because part of democracy is that we grow and we give equal rights to everybody. And the fact that we declared ourselves a democracy in 1789, when in reality we couldn't call ourselves that until 55, 56 years ago. Fact is that Juneteenth officially becoming a holiday is kind of like, yeah, it is another Independence Day, but this time it's for African Americans and for other minorities. Well, it's mostly for African Americans because they were the ones that were suffering slavery and they were the ones that were freed. But it's important to recognize it because it's also important. It's another, like I said, it's a first step towards it's another step towards recognizing different cultures and different people of color. And I hope that the way I see it, I hope that this is a way for people for Asians to be recognized as well as our own race.
Thank you, Akash. Any thoughts on that, Anusha? You made a point at the beginning itself. It's now it took all these years for us to recognize this. What would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually makes me really emotional to talk about because I actually watched a video. You may have seen it. It's going viral now, but it's a 94-year-old Black woman, and she's literally in a wheelchair, and it's pretty senile. And it seemed as if she had almost given hope. She fought her entire life for freedom and justice and equality, and she fought for 94 years of her life. And who knows what she has seen during her time in the United States. It was such an oppressive time. So seeing her watch the news that it's now an official holiday, it just touched me. And I hope that this acts as a catalyst movement for other oppressive regimes in other countries. And anything that has this kind of prejudice, we can't hold this, these values around the world. So hopefully this, although it did take a long time, long overdue, it's wonderful that it's being recognized. And I think it's the beginning of reparations for many Black Americans.
And to the minorities as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Anusha. Anita, ungonda abhiprayam in the June 19, அதாவது Juneteenth, இனி வரும் காலங்கள்ல, but there is even though we have recognized it, but there is a gap, there's a continuous gap in between communities, whether it's economy, whether it's employment, whether it's healthcare, that, even though we try to bring the gap closer, but I think it's still there. That's my humble opinion. From your lens, somebody who is born and brought up here, would you agree with that in terms of there are still existing gaps on economy, unemployment, healthcare, and overall other aspects that a common man has to go in terms of his rights or her rights?
Yes, I definitely agree. There are still a lot of disparities in both the access to opportunities that Black people have in the country, as well as their general treatment by society and by systems in our country that have actually been created to keep them down, or to keep them in poverty, or to keep them, from moving out of certain neighborhoods. There's some, like, we've in our college classes, we talk a lot about systemic racism and how policies and and local governments and all of these things can work together to create a completely different world in which Black people live their lives than the rest of Americans or the rest of society. And I think that's something that that we have to devote resources to be able to fully understand those issues and then actively work towards dismantling those systems and those issues.
Great points, Anita. What does systemic color difference or systemic racism means in common man's terminology?
Well, I think it means that it means a combination of policies and laws and portrayals of groups of people that lead to a disparity in opportunity or a difference in opportunity. So no matter how, people can work as hard but not have the same level of success or the same, the same successes as another person because of these systemic issues that are creating divisions in society by race and by a number of other demographics also.
Would you say suppressing a targeted community based on their color, based on their race?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. It's a lot of the times it is based on race, and it's very hard to combat. It's very hard to get rid of these systems because if you take them to a court, these are what are written into our laws, and the courts have to follow the laws that we have passed. So a lot of the times they're self-sustaining systems that can just that are very, very difficult to dismantle.
Right. Thank you. I'll come back on. There's a follow-up question as well, but we'll go through this theme and then I'll come back to you. Anusha, from an outsider, from an immigrant perspective, for non-Americans, when they watch movies or anything that is based out from the US, the villains or the bad guys are portrayed in a different color perspective. Why is that?
So, thankfully, I haven't noticed this. Maybe I'm just not watching enough Indian or, world shows. But yes, it's true. And I think there's a great example of this colorism and this racism. Because in India, when you look at the colorism that exists in India, we're all brown, right? We all come from the same region. We all have the same undertones. Maybe we vary from fairness to darkness, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. Yet there's still this colorism. And the prime example that I was going to use is the product Fair and Lovely. That is just, it almost sounds like a parody. It almost sounds like it shouldn't be real. It's satirical because it literally is marketing the word fair and lovely, saying, if you're fair, then you're beautiful. So it's putting this beauty standard on people. So whatever that standard, if that standard exists there, it's very easily transmittable to other genres like movies. So when you see actors being hired based on their skin to play the villain, that is prejudice and that is discrimination, and that in itself is creating, for the viewers, it's creating an implicit bias. So you may not notice, oh, the villain's Black, but in your head, your mind is recognizing it, and on its own, subconsciously, you're creating a bias. So those biases stay with us throughout our lifetime. So in order to mitigate these problems, we have to acknowledge it ourselves. We have to say, you might not be racist, you might not be colorist, but you still can hold these biases and you may not know them. So I think the first step is acknowledging that. The second step is saying, how can I fix this moving forward? How can I make sure this never happens again? And third step, it doesn't stop there with yourself. It should expand to your community. If you've learned something and you've been enlightened, you should, pay that forward to the rest of your community because everyone can benefit from that. So to answer your question, I think that's why in any kind of genre, the portrayal is like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for that great example as well. That has been something, that's been bothering me, but, it was spot on.
Me too. Yeah.
Right. So Akash, we've had a government change. The resolutions have been getting changed. Do you expect with this current government and administration, things are going to get fast tracked, and equality among communities are going to be a priority for them at this point?
Unfortunately, I'm going to be very cynical here, and I'm going to say not at this time. It's definitely not going to get fast tracked. As some of you guys might have known, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin has recently went against the For People Act and the filibuster. The For the People Act is the sweeping voting rights regulations, where apparently you get like voting rights, where voting rights are changed for the better because of recent issues happening in many states, particularly Georgia and Florida. He said that it's very partisan. I kind of had to. I'm going against it. I'm going against him, saying that I kind of have to disagree because, first of all, people need to have the right to vote, and Georgia and Florida have introduced certain standards that will make it harder for people, especially people of color, to vote. And I think like if you are part of the problem, if you're part of the reason why these voting bills are passed, then you're part of the problem. It's very clear that your party is in the wrong. You're not fighting on policy, but you're just trying to cheat to win. But like going back to Joe Manchin is going against the For the People Act, I kind of disagree that, well, maybe disagree is not the right word. I kind of have to say that his stance on the For the People Act is kind of like digging his heels because not wanting the For the People Act to be passed is kind of like how do I put it? It's very wrong. It's wrong because you have someone like you need to have fair voting rights so that everyone can vote, plain and simple. You need to make sure that billionaires are not controlling elections, plain and simple. And yet he doesn't want that because it's too partisan. And he goes against the filibuster, which would help fast track a lot of these bills because he wants to be bipartisan when the Republican Party has yet to be able to come to the table in regards to these issues. And even with this, it's definitely going to take a while before we start to break the system of systematic racism. There's a lot of things that we need to do in order to completely break the cycle. For starters, we do have to get more voting regulations, and secondly, we need to help the African American community and other communities that are lower income grow as a culture and as a community so that they can get the same opportunities as people who are upper class and are people who are Caucasian. And we also need to start the conversation regarding brutality against people of color, because unfortunately it is still a real thing. And so unfortunately, it's going to take a while. And with the current system we have, the filibuster that will prevent certain regulations being passed, it's definitely not going to be fast tracked. That got a little long winded. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just to piggyback on what you mentioned, when it comes to the voting rights, after the independence, only white Americans, in Tamil we call Nilachuvandra, whoever who had land or who had the ownership of farms and stuff, they were the only one who were allowed to vote. And then it took X amount of years for the transformation to happen. So what you just mentioned is absolutely right. It's not going to happen overnight. To Anusha's point, at least we've recognized it. We need to do something at this point, and it has been recognized. But it's a long way. It's a long way ahead of us. To summarize what you just said, if we can all work together as one community, this could come in a reality. 61% of US immigrants are eligible to vote. That's another statistical number. So 61% of immigrants, if they can make a difference on their voting rights, in believing the rights of the minorities and making the correct decisions when it comes to selecting the public officers, whoever who is going to represent, I think that's where the change is going to happen. Again, that's my humble opinion. But thank you, Akash. To go back to you, Anita, 15th, 19th, and the 26th Amendments, they are the ones who gave the rights in terms of the voting rights and who can vote. And it from my perspective, a guy who had come from Sri Lanka, and to learn all these stuff where only white Americans were allowed to vote. Women were not allowed to vote until certain years, and then the African Americans were not allowed to vote. And it took all these years to recognize all these the loopholes and fix it. Now, from your perspective, what do you think the future is going to be for the minorities? Now, mind you, now we have a minority or second generation American or Asian American or South Asian American as the vice president currently. Will this make any change in the coming years towards the minorities in rectifying the issues and fixing them as they go forward?
I definitely think that having more people of color and more women in participating in political processes and in our government is going to make a positive change. But representation doesn't always necessarily mean that change is going to be positive. But as long as we're working in a direction that is if we can people that are willing to work for the common good and that are willing to make a change, that it's going to make a difference.
Thank you. நீங்கள் பார்த்தும் கேட்டும் கொண்டிருப்பது அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகம் மற்றும் அமெரிக்க தமிழ் வானொலி வழங்கிக் கொண்டிருக்கும் யாதும் ஊரே யாவரும் கேளீர் என்ற சிறப்பு கலந்துரையாடல் நிகழ்ச்சி. அனிதா, தர்மராஜா, ஆகாஷ் பத்மதேவன் மற்றும் அனுஷா ராஜேந்திரன் ஆகியோர் நம்முடன் இன்றைய நாள் தங்கள் நேரத்தை பகிர்ந்து கொண்டிருக்கின்றார்கள். ஜூன் 19th அமெரிக்காவின் விடுதலை நாள், கருப்பின மக்களுக்குரிய அந்த அடிமைத்தனம் ஒழிக்கப்பட்ட நாளாக இந்த நாள் ஜூன் 19ஆம் நாள் இங்கு அனுஷ்டிக்கப்பட்டு வருவது வழக்கம். முதன் முறையாக 155 ஆண்டுகளின் பிற்பாடு ஜூன் மாதம் 17ஆம் நாள் 2021ஆம் ஆண்டு உத்தியோகபூர்வமாக இது ஒரு விடுதலை தினமாக இங்கு இருக்கும் பாராளுமன்றத்தினால் இம்முறை அது உள்வாங்கப்பட்டிருக்கின்றது. அது மிகவும் வரவேற்கத்தக்க விடயம்தான். அது பற்றியும் நாங்கள் உரையாடி இருக்கின்றோம். அனுஷா, லெட்ஸ் உங்களோட பேசுவோம். நீங்கள் உங்களோட பார்வையில இனி வரும் காலங்கள்ல the years ahead, நீங்கள் சொல்லியிருந்தீங்க it took us all these years to come to an agreement or come to an acceptance in terms of what we had missed. Things are changing now. From your perspective, what should we expect? How should we contribute as a minority in terms of making this change happen and also to be part of this process?
Yeah, so I think in the past, I would say 2 years, I feel like we've all just been living through historical events over and over again. I mean, the change has been unreal, and most of it, thankfully, has been good. Last year during the Black Lives Matter protests, I went to all of them in Charlotte, North Carolina. My parents, they were very proud of me for wanting to be there and wanting to support them, and they understood why. But at the same time, I'm their child, so safety first, right? And so in their heads, I don't think they fully understood the passion that me and the group of people that I went with had, and how much we believed in this cause. I mean, I'm not Black. I'm a South Asian from South India. And, people ask me all the time, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, what do we have in this? What do Indians have to do with this? But we have so much to do with this. We would not even be here if it wasn't for Black people. In 1964, the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, that was the catalyst that triggered the Immigration Act of 1965. that had in blatant words, it said Asian Americans, all Asian Americans, Chinese, Indian, everyone can come here. And that did not just appear due to our, the government. That was fought for during the civil rights movement from Black people. They didn't need to do that. They had their own suffering. They had a lot to deal with on their own. And so that to me just shows the camaraderie and the solidarity that they stand with other people of color, other minorities. And it's our moral obligation we kind of owe them, I wouldn't say we're indebted to them, but we should never forget what they've done for us. I can say, I know I wouldn't be here. My parents would not be here. And so watching any kind of injustice happen, it should affect all of us, because at some point the injustice will probably happen to us. And if we don't stand up for anyone, then there'll be no one left to stand up for us. So.
Thank you. Very, very, it came from your heart. I can see it. So
yeah.
We are proud of you for what you have done, and, we continue to do what you're doing. Just to piggyback on what you just said, we started this movement called Black Lives Matters. It started with the most disturbing image that anybody could see on that particular year. And it's going to be, for those of who have witnessed it, it's going to be there for the rest of the life. But do you think the momentum has gone down now, ever since what has taken over everything else in the name of pandemic?
I think that the reason we saw such momentum when it did outbreak was because the media was willing to cover it. We see what our press would like us to see. There are so many things that happen state by state that we don't know and that happen in local news, but because high profile channels choose not to showcase this, we don't understand that these issues are still in existence and people are still protesting. I've seen, to this day, a lot of people in my neighborhood still have their Black Lives Matter signs up. I mean, it wasn't just, like a prop that they used. It's something, and it's very heartwarming to see. It's something that they keep around. So I would not say that the momentum has died down, because there has not been a solution to this police brutality and these heinous crimes. The momentum will always be there, just because the media isn't portraying it at all times. I think the people are still pretty fueled up. So I would say the momentum is still there.
Thank you, Anusha. Just wanted to also in the நிகழ்ச்சிக்கு அனுசரணை வழங்கி கொண்டிருக்கும் பீம் ரியல் எஸ்டேட், பண்டி பிரியாணி, பசிபிக் கிரீன் ஃபண்டிங் மற்றும் சிஎம்ஐ குளோபல் நிறுவனங்களுக்கும் எங்கள் நன்றிகள், வணக்கங்கள். உங்களது நேரத்தையும் அதை நேரம் இந்த நிகழ்ச்சிக்கு மற்றும் அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்துக்கு வழங்கும் அனுசரணைக்கு சிஎம்ஐ குளோபல், பசிபிக் கிரீன் ஃபண்டிங், பண்டி பிரியாணி மற்றும் பீம் ரியல் எஸ்டேட் ஆகியோருக்கு எங்கள் நன்றிகள். Anita, anything else from your perspective, as we are almost at the last word in terms of wrapping up for today? Anything else that you would like to bring up?
I think the most important thing that was on my mind these past couple of days is that making like Juneteenth a federal holiday still isn't enough. It's a good symbol, but it is only giving a day off to federal workers who are, again, mostly white or Asian workers, and it's forcing and people of color who work in different industries or like retail or other industries are still have to work and still don't get to see the benefit of that. And you said yourself, like there was in the Senate, it passed with 100, senators who approved to make this a holiday, because it's such a low impact, like solution to some of these issues, and some of the more important issues Republicans or even sometimes Democrats are unwilling to discuss in our national government or in our local governments. So I just hope that people understand that, like, yes, it's a good thing that Juneteenth was made a federal holiday, but there's so much more that we need to be doing and has to be done now, So
that's a great point, Anita. I mean, it's like, let's recognize this as a holiday, but we don't have to do anything anymore until the next election comes. Is it something like that? So that when it's pretty much from the African American communities, or from their perspective, they may say, oh, this government is really into us in terms of making changes. But the reality is, when it comes to the true issues, the real issues that needs to be addressed, apart from giving a day off for those who work for the federal government, the unemployment, the healthcare, the equality on housing, and the food stamps, and then we live in Washington D.C., and if you take most of the schools here, there are kids who come to school, they don't know what they're going to have for lunch or dinner on the next day, when they especially without this the food programs or the meal programs that are offered. So the core issues are still existing, but giving a federal holiday, or at least flagging it as a federal holiday, is not going to address it. Is that what you're trying to say? Right. Akash, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the fact that Juneteenth is just, like I said, it's just another step. But it's a very small step too, because it's, like Anita said, it was just like it's just like a holiday. Like people, it's very it's not going to really, in the long run, it's really not going to do anything except maybe a day off, and maybe some schools will teach us, will finally put it in their curriculums, teach us why we have Juneteenth. Like people, we know why 4th of July happens. Why not teach about Juneteenth? And hopefully that will create an impact. But at the same time, I do hope that things get, what I said before, I said it was a bit of a cynical now, but I do hope that in the future things will change. And I think the best way to do, there's like a couple things that we can do to change it. First, we need to create awareness for the 2022 midterms. We cannot forget that just as much as Biden being president impacts things, people in Congress and people in the Senate, people in the House are very important, as well as local elections as well. We need to change the tide as to how we can fix things. And I also hope that businesses take the opportunity to, big businesses particularly, to take the opportunity to invest in cities that could potentially be cities. You saw how, like in Georgia, a lot of the big reasons why it turned blue is because big businesses invested. People came to Atlanta particularly, but also other places, and they became more and more blue and a lot more progressive minded. I feel like we can do more. We can continue to do that with other cities that are getting ready to change. I think these are more steps that everyone can take. Republicans say that corporations are people. Well, why don't corporations help fellow people? And in the meantime, we need to vote. Most importantly, we need to go back to the polls in 2022 and vote, both in the primaries and in the generals, because we need to help. We need to help. And most importantly, we need to educate ourselves, because that's the most important thing. We need to learn about why people feel a certain way.
Right. Thank you, Akash. Anusha, any closing thoughts or closing remarks or any other things that you would like to share? I do have a point that I wanted to ask you, but let me give you the space for your thoughts, and then I'll come back to you.
Sure. I mean, you've both said it so wonderfully. Both of the points that you guys touched on, I totally agree. This kind of marks the day that it's like the beginning of reparations, but this is almost just acknowledging that slavery existed. This isn't truly doing anything for the people who suffered the most, because there's still, oppressive policies and redlining and gerrymandering and voter suppression laws. And like you talked about in Georgia has, the past year, the news has been crazy about the amount of people that are trying to infiltrate Stacey Abrams's efforts to engage more voters. And it was really terrifying to watch that so many people are willing to dismantle our beautiful democracy, because genuinely, when you look at around the world, democracy is such a privilege to have. It's a republic. It takes hard work. It takes people like from all kinds of the world and people like us coming together, having conversations. I mean, these are really complex issues, but that doesn't mean that we can't come up with complex solutions for them. So I guess what I would say is this is a great start, and I'm very happy and proud of my country for doing that. But I still have a lot of things that I would like to see for our future.
Thank you. Great points, Anusha. I just wanted to take a step back and think through a dinner table conversation that would happen in an African American family. What it would be or what it would like to be. If you guys put yourself on that environment, on that scenario, do you guys have anything to think about what sort of a conversation that they would ever have?
I have many Black friends, and I've been to their homes and had dinners with their families. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, it's almost like they're desensitized to the, prejudices that they have to feel. And literally in schools, work, just going to the grocery store or the gas station, getting profiled while they're driving their own car. It's truly like they're living a life, out of survival mode. And it shouldn't be that way. And, I had to have a difficult conversation with my brother, although he's not Black, but he likes to play basketball outside. And sometimes he'll go at nighttime and he'll put his hood on with his hoodie and he'll ride his bike to the basketball courts. And this was during all of these horrible videos were coming out. And I already knew this was happening, right? And it's not a conversation that I felt comfortable having with him. But I just thought, every single Black family is probably having this conversation with their daughter and their son. So if they can do it, I can do it. This discomfort is good, because having this kind of conversation is good. It was really sad that I had to mention that to him, but I could only imagine, the rigor in which that impacts them and their families. So it makes sense.
Yep. Thank you. I just wanted to get to that because that's where, at the end of the day, that's where that conversation starts from. Right. So thank you, Anusha, to be spot on that. நேர்கள் பார்த்தும் கேட்டும் கொண்டிருப்பது அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகம் மற்றும் அமெரிக்க தமிழ் வானொலி வழங்கிக் கொண்டிருக்கும் யாதும் ஊரே யாவரும் கேளீர் என்ற இந்த சிறப்பு நிகழ்ச்சியில் எம்முடன் இணைந்து கொண்ட அனுஷா, ராஜேந்திரன், ஆகாஷ் பத்மதேவன், அனிதா, தர்மராஜா ஆகியோருக்கு அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்தின் சார்பில் எங்கள் நன்றி கலந்த வணக்கங்கள். Thank you guys for spending the Saturday with ATR and ATM in bringing your thoughts and sharing your ideas and opinions. So on behalf of ATM, I would like to thank you all for your time.
Roman Andri, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Akash. Thank you, Anita. நேர்கள் இதுவரை அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகம் வழங்கிய யாதும் ஊரே யாவரும் கேளீரில் Juneteenth சேசிங் ஃப்ரீடம் அல்லது விடுதலை நாள் என்ற தலைப்பில் நாங்கள் வழங்கிய இந்த கருத்து பகிர்வு நிகழ்வு பார்த்தும் கேட்டும் மகிழ்ந்தீர்கள். இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியில் பங்கு பெற்றியவர்களுக்கு எங்கள் நன்றிகள். இதில் பகிரப்பட்ட கருத்துக்கள் அவர்கள் சார்ந்ததை ஒழிய அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகம் இந்த கருத்துக்களுக்கோ அல்லது இந்த உரையாடலில் அவர்களது பிரத்தியோக கருத்துக்களுக்கோ பொறுப்பல்ல என்ற அந்த பொறுப்பு துறப்பையும் நான் இதில் சேர்த்துக் கொள்ள விரும்புகின்றேன். இன்றைய இந்த நிகழ்ச்சிக்கு எங்களுக்கு அனுசரணை வழங்கிய CMI குளோபல் பசிபிக் கிரீன் ஃபண்டிங், பாண்டி பிரியாணி மற்றும் பீம் ரியல் எஸ்டேட் ஆகியோருக்கு எங்கள் நன்றிகள். இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியை நீங்கள் பார்த்து கொண்டிருப்பீர்களாயின் உங்கள் மனதில் இந்த நிகழ்ச்சி போன்ற இதர நிகழ்ச்சிகளுக்கும் உங்கள் வியாபார நிலையங்களுடனான அனுசரணையை நீங்கள் வழங்க விரும்பின் நம்முடன் நீங்கள் தொடர்பினை மேற்கொள்ளலாம். நீங்கள் வழங்கும் அனுசரணையானது அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்துக்கு அல்ல, அது தமிழுக்கான ஒரு முயற்சி என்பதை உங்கள் மனதில் நீங்கள் வைத்துக் கொள்ளுங்கள். மீண்டும் இன்னும் ஒரு நிகழ்ச்சியில் உங்கள் அனைவரையும் சந்திக்கும் வரை அமெரிக்க தமிழ் ஊடகத்தின் பிராந்திய கலையகத்திலிருந்து விடைபெற்று செல்கின்றோம். இன்றும் ஒளிபரப்பில் உதவிய அண்ணன் ஆறுமுகம் பேச்சிமுத்துவுடன் இது ரூபன் ஜெகநாதன். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.